G'day, welcome back. This is the next video in my series on the World Chess Championship blunders. And today we're moving on 1 year from 1984 with the sort of famous sort of drawn, cancelled World Championship match where Karpov had been leading 5-3 but was being caught towards the end. And then in 1985, basically it was determined there would be a rematch. You know, no other players involved here, no other candidates matches or anything like that. See the background. See in the thumbnail, I've got a better version of Karpov there, a more age-relevant picture of him. Although he is 12 years older than Kasparov in all these matches, as it were. The thing important about this match is that 1984 got canned, and then 1985 had a couple of things which were relevant to it. Just let me switch over to the capture screen, look at the Wikipedia page first. And first thing is it's gone from the unlimited must-win 6 to the 24 games, which was the original sort of format before and including Fischer-Spassky, and then it got changed, and then that actually seems to have messed it up a little bit. So we went back to a fixed number of games, and then of course the problem then is if it's a draw, 12-all draw, so it would be Karpov. So there are two things which are going to come to pass. First of all, if in terms of having an impact on the game. If it's going to be 12-12 draw, Karpov would retain his world championship. Kasparov effectively has to win this match. And then the second thing is that Karpov will be granted a rematch if he loses. So some of these things come to pass, right? So it will in fact affect game 24, and then of course we're going to have in 1986 another round of these guys playing, and just sort of this I have some recollection of this, just an amazing period where these were very tough matches between two of the greatest players ever. Okay, so that's the match, and what we're going to do today is we're going to look quickly at two games which are most interesting. Game 11, which is a very famous blunder, so we've got back to another 5-star blunder. And then game 24, which was a blunder, but it was an unusual situation because it was a must-win game for Karpov, so probably played some moves he wouldn't have played under other circumstances. And then since I've got a couple of 5-star blunders since last time I did it, we'll have a quick look at the tier list and just sort of refresh the types of blunders we have seen already. Okay, so let me close the Wikipedia and the screen. Okay, sorry about that. I just wanted to get rid of that little information tab at the bottom. Okay, so here we can see the top right chart shows the game score, and Karpov is blue. So Karpov got ahead early on, and then Kasparov during the middle of the tournament, including this game 11, caught back up, and then sort of got a little bit ahead towards the end. And then you got to this last game where I said Kasparov was 1 point ahead. Karpov had to win to get back to a draw, and he did not. And then now this bottom right chart, you can see what happened in this game. Nothing's happening, it's boring, draw, and then one mistake by Karpov, and it was over, and he lost this game, which, you know, obviously had some decent impact on the outcome of the match. And it's also the type of the blunder. Okay, so let's have a look at the position. This is after move 21. Let's have a look what's going on. You can see that the white's kind of been probing the, go back one move, probing the black queen side with his rook and his bishop. This is attacked 3 times, defended 3 times, and just sort of decided to shift focus back to the center. Rook cd1. Now this is key. This is Karpov, you know, trying to double rooks, and there were better ways of doubling rooks because Kasparov plays queen g4, which is kind of a threatening, probing move. You can see that it's sort of attacking both rooks in some way, and the rook on d7 is not protected. Then the next move is the big blunder by Karpov. So let's have a look what he played. That's showing all the other alternatives. All those other 3 rook moves are better in terms of trying to double. If he wants to double, he should probably play rook d6. Okay, rook c to d8. So this is the blunder. See if you can work out the winning line. It's not many moves deep, and in fact, there are some comments. I'll read a bit of what Kasparov said in a bit. It seems like Karpov's spidey sense was gone, and he just needed to make another couple of accurate moves, and rooks and all sorts of things be exchanged, and it'll probably peter out to a draw. However, he wasn't alert to the risks in the position. So if you had a chance to look at it, what is the winning line? Bang. You know, nobody expected that. In fact, you get back one move. One of the things which Kasparov said, or maybe Karpov thought we were going to check and then pick up the rook, which doesn't really do very much, to be honest. So what's going on here. Just want to have a bit of a look at the position because it's quite interesting just to see the things that actually you get a sense of this is sort of like hanging by a thread in some ways, which is why Karpov had to be more careful. This bishop is loose. You could say this knight's a little bit loose because it's protected twice, but that means the queen is needed to guard the knight, but maybe it also needs to guard the f7 square in some lines. And obviously the rook is attacked and it's defended by this rook, but if that rook wasn't there, you can see that the back rank is quite loose, and if the king had to come up to the f7 square, you can see that the bishop can drop back and attack the king, and that would open up a skewer or a discovered attack on the rook. So you can see that there's a lot of attacking going on there, latent attacks, and that's what's going to happen. So let's have a look at how this all plays out. Rook is gone. Got to retake the rook. No other moves. Now, as we said, back rank is now weak, so we run up there. Only one move. This is where that skewer comes into play. I mentioned you drop back, skewer. Now, putting the queen in front probably doesn't help. This is where the game ended. Karpov resigned. Let's just continue the line for a move or two. Pawn in the way, and then make sure I've got this marked up. And pawn away, and then take. That's the discovered attack. We've taken the rook. Now maybe Karpov saw this and he said, okay, 2 rooks for a queen. You can still hold it and that'd be fine, right? But the problem is that you can see what we're saying is that bishop is undefended. The knight is defended by the bishop and the queen, but the queen needs to hold f7. So, in fact, in this case, if the queen ran away, it would actually be checkmate, right? The whole thing's just falling apart now, right? Because bishop can't go there to keep the hold of the knight because it'll just get taken by the rook. And if the bishop, let's say, goes to a6, I mean, there's not really anything to do here, but let's say, actually, the computer line is king g7. Where does that get you? King g7. Just take the bishop instead. Then we're taking the knight off. Right, you've got too much material, and black king is still also exposed. We can point out, but obviously the 7th rank is kind of weak in some ways, particularly after g6 is forced, and there was no c-pawn sort of protecting this structure over there. Anyway, so to get back a few moves, that's really spectacular continuation. So you call the queen sacrifice, but he gets the material back within a couple of moves. Okay, so that one ends up being ranked 5 stars. Well, we'll do the tier list because it's a very important impact on the match, because obviously this is where Kasparov gets back to even, right? So very important impact on the match. Impact on the game, obviously severe. It was a draw and it's a loss. And the blunder itself, pretty poor. You can see it's only a couple of moves of depth. So Karpov was obviously just playing on autopilot when this happened. Okay, cool. So that is game 11. So now let's move along to and only covering 2 games today. Let's just click through to game 24. Let me just load it up here. This will save that extra markup I did, and then give me 1 second. Okay, there we go. You can see the chart. It looks pretty shocking, doesn't it, right? Once again, kind of drawish, but Karpov played a few moves which maybe he wouldn't have to try and win this game, had must-win game, and then must-win game is white in the last game of the World Championship match. And then Kasparov actually blundered back, to be honest, and then Karpov blundered again, right? So let's have a quick look at this. We can probably look at a couple of blunders here. Right. Okay, so here's the main position. Black's just played king h8. It's quite a complicated position. Once again, it looks like lots of loose pieces, a lot of pawns gone, just pieces running around. The mistake is e5. So there's a couple of other continuations which held the balance. We won't go to e5. So good chance again to test your tactical nous and see what Kasparov did. Okay, so I think the main point is that with this move, obviously there's other moves like taking the rook with check, whatever, would have diverted this. This open diagonal is going to cause a lot of stress for white. So that's what was played. And you can see I'm just highlighting there that if the king comes out, there's a horrible check on e3, and if it gets blocked, well, then you lose the exchange. So basically king h1 becomes the only move. So let's do that. Yeah, knight f1, king f1 would be knight e3 check. And then how does this attack continue? Pick up the bishop there. Take back. Now, of course, you can see there's a horrible discovered check, so we do that. And you can see he didn't even bother picking up the queen. I mean, the reason for that is that obviously this rook is on pre the whole time, so knight d4 check, king h1, and now we just pick up the rook. And I believe that's where Karpov resigned. He's like 2 pieces down. He got a lot of pawns, but there's no way he could win. He needs to win. No way he could win this position. That little combination of basically picking up the rook is what finished the World Championship match. We were looking at this later bit of the chart, not the early bit, because there was blunders earlier on. So anyway, all that sort of stuff. So what I want to do, I'll just read a little bit from what Kasparov wrote. I think this book I've got, I've given up on doing those horrible out of focus screenshots I've been doing. I'll just read it out to you. This is talking about game 11, which is actually, maybe it describes a little bit of what I'm trying to do, maybe with this little series of videos. So, I quote, of course, I'm quoting Kasparov, sorry. Of course, Karpov's oversight in this game was something quite out of the ordinary, but it should not be forgotten that it came after 10 very tough battles, the last two of which, games 9 and 10, had demanded of him an enormous expenditure of nervous energy. And besides, in the 11th game itself, he was initially in difficulties, but then the worst was over. It would seem that he prematurely relaxed. That's kind of what we're saying, right? And then, okay, next paragraph. If you've got the book, just read along. After the game, certain commentators conferred on the move 22, Rook CD8, some rather too colourful description, the blunder of the century. Yeah, a unique occurrence in matches, blah, blah, blah. And actually then Kasparov mentions a few games, which is not that unique, it just happens. Bronstein Botvinnik, 6th game. We've seen that one. Smyslov Botvinnik, 3rd game, 58, we've seen that one. Tal Botvinnik, 17th game, 1960, we've seen that one. Petrosian Spassky, 14th game, 1969, we've seen that one. Spassky, Fischer, first game, 72. Well, we did a whole video on that one, and I didn't think it was a particularly bad blunder. He did lose the game for other reasons, effectively. And then we've got Kasparov, Karpov, 16th game from the previous match, and then actually Gary adds another one in. I can also add my blunder in the 7th game of our 5th match. And then he does, in the next paragraph, he talks about some sort of thing here. It seems to me that when talking about blunders, account should be taken of the level of the event and corresponding the tension of the struggle. It should be realized that such mistakes are inevitable, even in duels for the world crown, because chess is played by people and sooner or later they become tired. True, in my 2nd and 3rd matches with Karpov, the number of defects per unit struggle was comparatively small, and on the whole, the quality of the play of them was very high. And there's sort of a summary of what we're kind of thinking about in terms of the blunders come about because people are under a lot of pressure and a lot of tension, and maybe there's some match situation forces them to do things they wouldn't otherwise do. Okay, cool. So that is what Kasparov wrote about game 11. Before we go, just a quick look at the tier list. You can see there, I've redone it. I've actually put in these, you can see the half levels. So it's 5. No. So it's 6 stars, 5 stars, 4 stars, 3.5, 3, 2.5, 2, 1.5, and 1. As I say, I've tried to do it systematically. It's still subjective systematically in terms of impact on the game, impact on the match, how bad the blunder was, and whether some other things happened, like was it a double blunder or did it look particularly silly and stupid and all that sort of stuff, right? So now I want to do this because we've got Chigorin up the top. He's never going to be shifted. And then we've got these other ones, a couple of them Kasparov mentioned. So here's the knight sort of miscalculation by Bronstein in 51. There's the sort of help self-mate by Botvinnik. And there's the missed mate in 2 by Korchnoi. And then we have the missed Queen Zach game 11 we just looked at, right? So it's kind of filling out nicely now. We've got a bunch of these really, really famous errors, and we've got a few more in the sort of the 4-star category, and we'll probably have a nice top 10 by the time we finished. I think there's 2 more 5 stars I've got in mind, and there's probably other ones I missed. So when you look at it sort of in a systematic way, you find a few things that weren't evident at the time. Okay, so we'll keep updating that as we go along. That's it for today. Just those 2 games, game 11, game 24. And then next time around, we'll be doing the rematch. As I mentioned, that was one of the conditions of match. So there'll be rematch, 1986 rematch, Karpov versus Kasparov. Hope you enjoyed that. And thank you very much for watching.